In this video lecture, I'm going to go over how to set up your annotated works cited page. Now, this is a little different than the annotated works cited pages you may have encountered in other classes if you've ever done this activity before. Traditionally, an annotated works cited or annotated bibliography is set up where you have a citation and then underneath you would have a paragraph or summary of the text that you have read or that you may be using for research. But we're going to set up an annotated works cited that is a bit more, shall we say, immediately useful. And the reason for this is because this is going to be basically your, what we could call a cheat sheet for your final exam, which will be a research paper and or project depending on the semester. So what you need actually are quotes from your sources that you can easily cut and paste into your paper as you're writing, and you need works cited entries to make it easier to cite your paper, cite what you've read appropriately. So the first thing we're going to do for this document, you're going to actually submit this to me multiple times, and it's going to evolve each time that you do it. The first thing we're going to do is just make sure it's in MLA format. So over here you look at the font. We're using Microsoft Word 2016. You click this little box here and you make sure you have the same font, regular 12 point, and that this is going to stay the same on all documents based on a normal template. And then you check your paragraph and you make sure that the spacing here reads 0, the indentation reads 0, line spacing reads double. And then you make sure that's for all documents based on a normal template. Now you're going to set up your page numbers, which I went over in a previous video. So I'm just going to do this quickly. And you're going to set up your identifying information. And then, of course, you're going to put the date. Now, the date's going to change every time you submit this. Okay? So by the time you get done submitting this, there's actually going to be multiple sources on it. They need to be in alphabetical order, just like a works cited entry would be. But they're going to be different types of sources. And the first source that you're going to be required to cite is actually going to be your short story. So after you've read this short story, you've done a lot of reading on what is literature, you've defined what literature is to you. I want you to pick a specific critical lens and use that to develop what I'm calling a hypothesis. This will eventually become a thesis statement for this paper. So we're going to look up a critical lens in the textbook. We're going to look at that chapter on critical lenses. I believe it begins on 1899. You should have already read this. Yeah, 1890s is where it begins. And we're just going to pick something like biographical criticism because that's easy. And then I'm going to pick Ray Bradbury because none of you are writing on Ray Bradbury. And I am going to type first. I'm going to center. And I'm going to type annotated works cited (ENGL 1302.80 research project. And then I'm going to go over here and left justify or right justify. I'm going to type the word hypothesis, and I'm going to come up with a theory based on biographical criticism or historical criticism. Now, I know Ray Bradbury pretty well. I know his writing pretty well. I'm a big fan of Ray Bradbury, actually. I've taught his work a lot, and I've read his work a lot. So I also know that he was writing primarily during the 50s and 60s. This was the height of his popularity. So I'm going to come up with a hypothesis saying something along the lines of Ray Bradbury, use his full name, story a sound thunder influenced a generation of scientists to explore concepts like chaos theory. Okay, so I'm going to come up with this concept, because you have the butterfly. If a butterfly flaps its wings, it'll create a hurricane sort of concept. I'm going to use this story to make the argument that Ray Bradbury, as a science fiction author, actually influenced scientists to look into these things. Now, my first citation is actually going to be Bradbury's short story. And since for the work cited, I'm only citing the short story, I'm not citing anything else out of here, at least for right now. I'm going to type the citation this way. Now, if you're uncertain, you can always use Writing Matters, and you look up on these pages here. That's page 306. You're going to look for a selection, one or more selections from an edited or anthology, edited book or anthology, 310. And the citation's explained on page 310. So we are going to title it, and this is a short story, so it gets placed in quotes. Then we're going to use everything else we have from our other citations, a literature, an introduction to fiction, poetry, drama, and writing. And then we're going to put the shorthand ED capital. And we're actually going to put EDS because there's multiple editors. X.J. Kennedy and Dana Gayoa. Then we put a period. Then we put the edition, 13th edition. And then we put the city, Boston. Then we put the publisher, Pearson, comma, copyright date. And then we'll put the pages for Bradbury's story. Notice I'm referring to the books a lot. Even after you've done this for years, you still need to refer to the books to make sure it's correct, because these things update constantly. Print, and there, I have my first citation. And so your first citation will look very similar to this. The sections that will be different actually will be this right here, page numbers, and this part right here, because you'll have a different short story, whatever is assigned to you. Now, as you are reading the short story, I'm going to turn to that now. You're going to want to find quotes that you think will help support the ideas you have in your hypothesis here. So our hypothesis is that Ray Bradbury's story was influential, and I'm using historical criticism as a way of arguing that. And I am going to put something in here. So here we go. I'm going to type this part here, and I'm going to pre-format my citations. So like, I know this is going to be a longer citation. So I'm going to pre-format it as a block quote. The reason for that is it'll make it a lot easier to cut and paste it into my essay later. Pardon me. And you notice since this is already formatted as a block quote, the period goes inside the citation here. It's right here. And we have this here, as you can see. Okay? So you would need multiple quotes, and of course, depending on the quote type, you would format it differently. So for that scene, spoiler alert, he steps on a bug. Here we go. This is a good quote we can use. We can't take a trophy back to the future. The body has to stay right here where it would have died originally. So the insects, birds, and bacteria can get at it as they were intended to. Everything in balance. The body stays. And you see here that we have everything we need for the citation. Page 351. Okay? And because it's shorter than 4 lines, we're keeping it structured like this because it won't be a block quote, and the period goes on the outside of the parenthetical there. Now what you'd have to change when you're typing your paper is whether you put Bradbury here or not, depending on the in-text citation. So that's the first entry to your annotated works cited. The second entry, if you see here the second submission, you'll have to use a database article. Now, how do you get a database article? Well, there's a lot of ways to do it, but Lamar State College Orange, your college, offers you access to some amazing databases. So you'd go to our homepage, click on Library, and this is a little link on how to access database articles off campus, and it tells you how to do that to get your net ID and such. So go to that link first. But if you're on campus, you can just go here, click Academic Search Complete. That's the main one I use. And I always click Full Text to make sure that I get the right kind of source, and references available. And then I'm going to type in, for this one, you're going to have to try to type in a bunch of different things to see what you get. Type in a bunch of different search possibilities to see what you get. But I've done this sort of search before, so I'm just going to check it out now. Let me show you. See, and it didn't come back with anything. So I'm actually going to use what they originally told me to use. There's nothing really here that I'm seeing. Notice how I'm going through all of this to see if I can find something useful, and there's nothing. So here's the next thing I'm going to do. I'm going to type in just Ray Bradbury. Let's see what we can get. Homesteading on the Extraterrestrial Frontier, Science Fiction Studies, Peace Profile, Guardians of the Written Word. Here's some videos about related to be shocked to life. This is a explication on Fahrenheit 451, but that's still not giving us everything we want. Let's try this. See what we get. See, we're having some trouble here finding useful sources, so we have to keep searching in different ways. We have to try different things and see what it gets us. I'm going to try this article just to see if it's useful, and also so I can show you the citation. This is nice. This is going to compare it to Heinlein. Yeah. This is actually useful. Now, what you might find interesting about this journal is this is a PDF, so it's an actual scan from the journal itself. So we can treat it as a print in a sense. So the first thing we're going to look up here is the author Abbott, and notice his name alphabetically comes before Bradbury. So it will be the first entry now in our citation. And then we're going to put the title of the journal article. Now, again, this is your tool, Writing Matters. So I expect you to use it. You're going to go back to that page 306 and you're going to look for periodicals printed and electronic, and you're going to look for article in a scholarly journal, access to a database, and that's on page 316. And you're going to use that model. The first piece is the author's name. We have that. The next piece is the title of the article. We have that, and we need to put that in quotes. So, homesteading on the extraterrestrial frontier. Now, I want you to watch what I do here. Let me see if it works. Sometimes you can cut and paste the title. Sometimes you can't. It's not letting me do that, so I'm going to have to type it out. A lot of the time I type quickly, so I go back and I double check my spelling. Now the next thing we need is the title of the journal itself, and this is Science Fiction Studies. You have it there and here. So you have to look for the title of these things. The number one mistake students make when they are doing searches on databases is they give up too soon. They give up too soon on finding the information, and they give up too soon on citing the information. So the next thing we need is the volume number and the issue and the volume number. And if you look in Writing Matters, they don't use any shorthand ISS or VOL. They just give you the numbers. So when we look at this text here, we see that it says volume 32. We don't have an issue number that's easily findable. So what I am going to look for here on the little side here, we have a citation thing. And of course they have the different citations, but I always double check. So this is issue 2, volume 32, issue 2. And this part's actually correct. So I'm going to copy and paste it to make my life a bit easier. Hopefully all of you saw how I did that. And I'm going to go ahead and put in the hanging indent. And then when I go to complete this assignment, this second submission, I'll have quotes here from that article. Now you'll notice that for each of these citations you have something added to it. So the next one you'd find a web article, and then you would need to look in your database, type in Ray Bradbury influence on scientists. And you can't use a wiki, you can't use about.com, but you have something like Guardian, that's a newspaper, New York Times, you have USA Today. Let's try the Guardian. So yeah, when he passed away back in 2012, it wasn't that long ago, there were tons of eulogies for this man. I mean, he was one of the great men. So this is actually a newspaper online, and it's not accessed through a database. It's just an article in a magazine, weekly or monthly, accessed online. And that's on page 317 of Writing Matters. And you would cite that. In this case, this is Allison Flood. And you would get this title here. Oh, I see, I messed up a bit. Go back down here. There we go. And then we would need the title of the website. And this is the Guardian. Notice it's not the URL, it's the website. Okay? And it is sponsored by, notice we have to scroll down to find the sponsor often, Guardian News and News Limited, and Media Limited. And then it'll tell us the month it came out, June, right? And we have a date, if you see there, June was 7 June 2012. 7 June 2012, period. And you put web, then you put the date you found it, whatever date that is. And then that citation's done. I mean, you still have to do the hanging indent, as you know. See, there you go. And then the last thing, and you'll have quotes from the article there, then you have the next piece is actually going to be here. you're going to do a citation with a YouTube video. The way you cite YouTube videos is you would go in here and you'd look for other electronic sources, and you want to look for audio-visual source, online video clip on page 324. So let's just look up a YouTube video clip on Ray Bradbury. So we see Sci-Fi Commons is the performer in this instance. That's actually not a performer, that's a company itself. So we're going to skip that. We're going to put the title here first. Ray Bradbury, Story of a Writer. So it'll be Ray Bradbury.
Here at the Rocketdyne Propulsion Laboratory, in a blast-scarred valley of the Santa Susana Mountains, parts of the engine which will power Americans on their first voyage to the moon are about to
Story of a Writer. Okay. And then we are going to put in the website, YouTube.
For over 20 years, he has predicted and examined the joys and nightmares
We're going to
of the
put
coming age of the rocket.
words YouTube here. And actually, we are going to go back and put this Sci-Fi Commons there, so it's easy to find. And then we put the date it was posted, which should be shown somewhere here. Yeah, there it is, 7/2012. Web, 14 December 2015. And so underneath each of these you'll have quotes that you keep for your paper. And that's how you set up your annotated works cited. So these are just the minimum sources. Of course you can have more if you want, but you have to have these four: a database article, a website article, and a YouTube video, and the story itself. And then each of these quotes pre-formatted. Okay, so that's how you set that up. As soon as you can get started on that, you should have your story assignments fairly soon. Notice how I'm going through and saving this.
As man steps beyond the threshold of space, Ray Bradbury, writer of the strange and the fantastic, finds himself a prophet in his own time.
And you'll have that with your notes as well. So I hope you found this helpful.